Happy Days, Part 1. The decades following World War II in many ways can be considered happy days. We can compare this to the post World War I period when Americans longed for a return to normalcy. This was a period of post war normalcy as well. Not only was World War II over, but the Great Depression which preceded it was over as well. But we'll see that these decades were a time of contrast, happy and not so happy days. There was prosperity, but there was also poverty, peace, war, love, and hate. First, let's consider what life was like for many American families following World War II. A popular television show, Leave It to Beaver, was produced during this time. Of course, we always have to be careful about applying television images to history, but behind this stereotype there was a lot of reality. In Leave It to Beaver, the two boys, Beaver and Wally, lived a fairly uncomplicated life. They're getting in trouble like young boys typically do. They seem to have a stable home life. Their dad has a company job, and their mom is always there at the door with supper ready right on time. It seemed to be a neat, orderly life. As we'll see, this reflects some of the reality behind Levittowns and suburban areas following World War II. For the American family, there was also a push to rely on experts at this time. In the outline, I used the phrase, leave Beaver to the experts. What are some examples of this? For one thing, during this time there was a movement towards consolidating schools. Beforehand, there had been many more one-room type schoolhouses with different grades all grouped together with a single teacher. But during this time period, there was consolidation, and students more often divided, spending the day with other students their same age. As local control was gradually lost, we'll see that in the 1980s and later there would be a reaction against this with the private and homeschool movement. Infant formula also gained a great deal of popularity during this time period. Mothers were told that the latest, greatest scientific formulas were the best things that they could give to their babies. Nursing rates dropped dramatically and have only recovered in recent decades with encouragement from organizations like the La Leche League. Many American families also looked to experts like Dr. Spock when it came to child-rearing practices. You might ask, what happened to June Cleaver, Beaver's mom? In 1963, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, where she argued that American housewives were missing out on fulfillment that they could only find outside the home, for example, in college or in a career. It's likely that as a result of changes such as the school systems and modern inventions to make housework easier, some American housewives may have been more bored than they had been previously. In a later lesson, we'll look at some more current statistics on women in the United States and revisit the issue of fulfillment. Also, during the post-World War II period, divorce rates rose rapidly. It's common for this to happen after wars. Probably part of the reason was many American couples got married very quickly, right before the husbands would be sent off to fight in World War II. I'm sure that prolonged separation and the trials of war increased strain on marriages. So already in just examining the American family, we can see some pros and cons, happy and not so happy days. This was a time of unprecedented prosperity. As I said before, the Great Depression was over. There were many new inventions. Consumerism was on the rise. More Americans could afford the latest gadgets and household appliances to make their lives easier. There were also homogeneous lifestyles, more so than before. Homogeneous. In the growth of the suburbs appeared what is known as Levittowns, or communities where there were cookie-cutter houses. Again, picture Leave It to Beaver. In Beaver's world, if you walk down his street, there's not a great deal of variety from one house to the other. I've been told that during this time period you could walk into many homes and without asking know how to find your way to the bathroom because the floor plans were so similar. Televisions were more widely available than ever before. During the 1950s, American households were watching more television. Not only was the fact that people had television a historical development, but also the images that were portrayed on TV of their society. This was also the time of the baby boom, with the couples from this so-called greatest generation returning from World War II. There was also the GI Bill, which not only made it possible for veterans to go to college when the others would not have had the opportunity, but it also enabled them to get low-interest loans to purchase first-time homes. All of this points to prosperity, happy days. But what about the other side of the coin? This was also a time of poverty. When Michael Harrington published The Other America, he pointed out pockets of poverty within this nation of overall prosperity. In these prosperous times, those pockets of poverty stood out in greater contrast than ever before. Some examples of these pockets of poverty are Indian reservations, urban ghettos, and the mountain south, Appalachia. For our purposes, we'll focus mostly on the pocket of poverty closest to home, here in Kentucky, Appalachia. In order to understand this phenomenon of pockets of poverty, it's important to realize that this was a time of economic transition. With the economy of World War II and the post-war period, there was the reality of northern migration to industrial centers in the cities. In mountainous areas with previously an agricultural focus, many people had been losing their farms and migrating to jobs in the cities, resulting in something of an identity crisis within the region. In other words, for those who wanted to remain in Appalachia, how would they fit into the modern economy? During the 1960s, President Johnson declared a war on poverty. With various organizations such as the Appalachian Regional Commission and the Office of Economic Opportunity, there is a variety of different theories behind strategies in order to deal with poverty. Let me first deal with a few of these major theories of poverty. First, there's the culture of poverty theory. This theory blames poverty on the people, suggesting that something about their culture, whether it be laziness, ignorance, or whatever, sometimes the terrain itself is to blame for areas of poverty. Then there's the dependency theory, sometimes called the colonization theory. This theory blamed poverty on outsiders. For example, outside ownership of natural resources that had created short-term, low-paying jobs and then left the region worse off than they had found it. There was also the theory that focused on infrastructure, material objects, roads, buildings. According to this theory, the land itself can be an obstacle to economic development. By building better roads to connect growth centers and by creating the infrastructure and tax incentives to attract new businesses and bring new jobs to the region, improvements have been made. But problems remain, partly because of disagreement over theory and approaches. Ron Eller, a former history professor of mine from the University of Kentucky, has written quite a bit about what he calls growth without development. Growth without development. Some jobs that have been brought to the region are low-paying jobs without good benefits, and often they're here today and gone tomorrow as companies move overseas. This is an example of short-term job growth without long-term healthy development for the region. As Ron Eller points out, defining progress is something that we have to do. It's not just an Appalachian problem, but a national problem. How do we define progress? Achieving real development involves working along with the values of the community. Growth that strengthens families and communities rather than pulling them apart. Maybe focusing on areas such as nursing homes. That is for the long-term development of a community, which not only provides jobs for youth who are going into nursing programs, but also providing for the long-term care for the elderly. That's one example. Alternative agriculture. Gone are the days of small family tobacco farms through the region, but there are other types of agriculture. Small business development, we need to think about our identity as a region and train our youth to think about how they will fit into the new economy. If you've ever seen the Bee Movie, you may have noticed how that after graduating, the bees went on a tour of the hive and they had to pick out the job that they would do for the rest of their lives. It was simple. Their whole world revolved around honey. They simply had to decide whether they wanted to stir the honey, pick out the crud, or whatever. But today isn't quite that simple. At one time, the vast majority of people might have easily followed in their parents' footsteps as tobacco farmers, for example. But now I think part of an education needs to involve thinking about how the world works and how we'll be able to fit into that world.